Discover the incredible journey of a cowboy who transformed a mail-order bride's hidden pain into a hopeful new life. The sun had barely risen over the Montana horizon when Jake tightened his grip on the plow's handle, the weatherwood biting into his rough palm. Each day was a test of endurance, his father's absence a ghost weighing heavily in the air. The land was a harsh mistress, refusing to yield the crop that could save his family's ranch from the clutch of bankruptcy that loomed closer with every passing moment. Alone, Jake felt the pressure of the vast sky overhead and the unforgiving earth beneath his feet. The ranch that was once the heart of his family now felt like a burden too massive to bear. Glimpses of a brighter future teased him during the rare moments he dared to hope, but reality kicked him back down to the dirt. What the hell was so special about him? A rugged cowboy trained in the art of perseverance stood paralyzed by a cycle of struggle that showed no signs of breaking. Desperation clawed at his insides, filling each breath with doubt, each step feeling heavier than the last. Could he keep the legacy alive, or was he destined to watch it perish in the wind? One evening, while sifting through the piles of old letters in the barn, he stumbled across a faded envelope addressed to a lady, a mail-order bride. The thought stirred something in his heart, a belief that maybe a fresh start could bring life back to these lifeless surroundings. Intrigued and almost laughing at the wild notion, Jake decided to respond, envisioning a glimmer of hope within the confusion of his thoughts. But with each scribbled line, a familiar rival rose within him, fear. What she thought him unworthy? What if he failed her, just as he feared he was failing the ranch? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As the days turned into weeks, Clara's responses filled his mailbox, each letter revealing layers of her past. He found himself captivated by her spirit, yet something primal entwined with hope tightened around his chest. Was he ready for this? She spoke of dreams buried under the weight of broken engagements and familial disapproval. They shared their fears through ink and paper, building an emotional connection that felt more real than the dry, cracked earth beneath his boots. But with every laugh shared in those letters, knots of anxiety coiled tighter in his gut. How would their bond withstand the scrutiny of the small town where whispers snaked through the crowded saloon, judging their mismatched union as bound to fail? In his heart, a storm brewed. Could he be the man she needed? Questions consumed him as he fought to maintain the ranch, frustrated by the distance and uncertain about the life they could build together. Just when a sense of peace felt attainable, he learned that her past was more tangled than he could have imagined. A specter surged forward, and the town, armed with prejudice and outdated views, summoned doubt that slithered around his resolve, tightening its grip with relentless pressure. He felt cornered. Much like the cattle he had to drive to market, an impending storm loomed, one that he couldn't ignore. The stakes were too high, and though Clara's pain threatened to shatter their dreams, Jake huddled deeper into his resolve. They needed to confront the ghosts of their pasts, but would they be strong enough to face what lay ahead? His heart raced as he prepared for the coming tempest, questioning if true love could ever conquer the prejudice shrouding them. A tension brewed on the horizon, leaving Jake feeling more vulnerable than the wide, empty prairie beyond his window. The question echoed relentlessly in his mind. Could courage lead them to acceptance, or would it fracture everything they had fought to build? Jake stood at the edge of the creaking porch, the weight of Clara's last letter still heavy in his hands. The sun sank lower in the sky, casting elongated shadows across the ranch yard. He inhaled deeply, the crisp air savagely sharp with the scents of hay and horse perspiration mingling together, a reminder of the life he was trying to hold together. Each breath felt suffocating, as if he could draw in hope only to exhale doubts. Clara's words haunted him, filled with unspoken pain and undying ambition. She had suffered deeply, and yet she still extended a hand, extending trust to him across the miles. Would he be able to support her fractured heart while wrestling his own demons? The thought pricked at his resolve. Every time he put pen to paper, he wondered, who was he to give her what she deserved when he felt like a failure? The ranch, with its cracked soil and empty barn, represented more than just a livelihood. It was a reflection of his own shortcomings. Determined to face the storm brewing inside him, he made his way toward the barn. The old structure groaned as he entered, memories clawing their way to the surface. He remembered the carefree laughter of his childhood, days spent with his father, training horses' unwavering faith in the land. But now he was paralyzed by fear, fearing he might fail again or worse, bring Clara into a life woven with hardship. A sudden realization jolted him. He had a choice to make. What if Clara could not only be a part of this world, but could help him heal the ranch and his spirit? Could he strip away the layers of his anguish, revealing not just the scars, but a stronger man beneath? He felt the stirrings of something unfamiliar purpose. He grabbed a shovel and started clearing the barn-esque clutter, each scoop of dirt firmer than before, as if the weight on his chest was being lifted with every toss of shavings. Physical labor broke through the mental shackles that tightened around his mind. As he worked, ideas flowed, each a spark of inspiration buried beneath despair. What if he transformed the barn into a place not just for livestock, but a hub for the community? A place where people would gather, where bonds could be forged and traditions embraced. Clara's spirit needed a ground to grow, and perhaps this could become their shared dream. With clarity piercing through the fog of disillusionment, he decided to write to Clara again, this time filled with purpose. He shared with her the vision he had, the plans that whirled in his mind like autumn leaves caught in the wind, and the possibility of building a future side by side. But it wasn't just words. It was a commitment, a promise to her and to himself to bring life back here, to confront the ghosts that haunted them. The days turned into nights, and the letters became a lifeline for Jake, binding him to Clara as they both navigated their vulnerabilities. He poured his heart into each reply, revealing fractures and hopes intertwined. As the ranch began to sprout new life with remodeling, so too did Jake's resolve strengthen. The townspeople's whispers nagged at him, but Jake decided not to let prejudice silence his voice. The first crunch of boot against gravel marked the beginning of the necessary confrontation that loomed ahead. He knew it was time to face the town. Would they see Clara as the woman who could mend broken spirits, or would they brand her the outsider he feared they would? As he prepared to take the plunge, every ounce of bravado built up from the long days of work pressed against his heart. What if this time the storm was not just within himself, but outside too? Determined, Jake set his jaw and stepped into the unknown, ready to challenge the world that had always judged him so harshly. The moment had come. He could feel it in his bones. But would he rise above the challenge, or watch everything they had forged slip through his fingers? Jake stood at the threshold of the town, his heart thrumming a chaotic rhythm against the pounding of his boots on the gravel path. The sun dipped lower in the horizon, bathing the buildings in a warm yet unnerving glow. Each step toward the main street felt like a confrontation with his own insecurities. What awaited him beyond the weathered wooden buildings, the faceless crowd, the gossip that had snaked its way around town? He could almost hear the whispers that would accompany his every move. "She-s not from here." They would say, "What does he think he-s doing?" The familiar echo of judgment threatened to pull him under, but clarity surged. He had a mission. Clara had trusted him, believed in a shared vision, and he wouldn't let fear override hope. As he approached the old general store, Jake took a deep breath, chiding himself to remain steady. A light flickered inside, casting uncertain shadows. From inside, he could hear low murmurs. Familiar faces appeared, gathered around the counter, laughter mingling with debate. It was time to step into their midst. He scanned for a welcoming face, then locked eyes with May, a neighbor who once offered kindness when times grew hardest. "Jake," she called out, her voice cutting through the murmurs. The store quieted, and all eyes turned toward him. "What brings you into town? We miss seeing you around." Her smile was a small beacon. It gave him a moment's reprieve. With a tentative nod, he approached the counter. "I've come to share something important," Jake started, his voice steadying within the familiar company. "It's about Clara." A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd, each look a mix of curiosity and wariness. "Clara? That woman from the East?" A man called from the corner, skepticism lacing his tone. Jake met his gaze, refusing to back down. "Yes, her. And she's more than just an outsider. We can learn from one another. She has a vision for this ranch and our community." Each word felt like mallet striking an anvil, shaping his conviction into something tangible. He continued to elaborate on their plans to revitalize the ranch as a community hub, a place not bound by their histories, but liberated by aspirations. As he spoke, he felt the tide slowly shifting. Some faces turned from derision to something quieter, perhaps curiosity or even understanding. But Jake could sense the lingering doubt, snaking through the crowd. They were wrestling with their own fears as much as he was his. But would they embrace that change? "I'm not asking you to accept her unconditionally," he admitted, his voice low, "but I'm asking for a chance for us all to rebuild together." The weight of his words hung heavy in the air, a suspended moment of reckoning. Silence fell, alongside the oppressive afternoon heat. Jake waited, his heart hammering ferociously, praying for understanding. Then May stepped forward, her brow furrowed thoughtfully. "What if your leadership is the change our town needs?" She posed, her voice steady but soft. A flicker of recognition sparked in a few other faces. Was it possible they could see beyond the prejudice bound in tradition? Yet, before he could even savor that flicker of hope, the man who had objected earlier scowled. "What do you think makes her qualified? She is not one of us." The crowd murmured again, tension tightening like a noose. "And neither are many of us," Jake countered swiftly. "Every one of us has felt the pain of being different. What if she is exactly what we need? What if she revitalizes not just the ranch, but our very spirit?" The dynamic shifted, palpable anxiety crackling through the air. Jake's heart raced as his confidence wrestled with uncertainty. Would they accept Clara's presence, or would his plea dissolve into ridicule? The room held its breath. As voices began to rise and opinions clashed, Jake recognized a truth lurking within the chaos. This wasn't just about Clara. It was about himself, too, proving his worth, embracing vulnerability, and defining his identity in the face of judgment. He took another breath, ready to confront the outpost of doubt still lingering in the corners of the room. The moment pulled taut, waiting for him to act, to forge a path through the unknown. The stakes had risen. The true test was just beginning. Would Jake break free of his self-imposed limits? Would he fight for Clara and his vision? As every eye bore down on him, he realized that everything was hanging in the balance. Everything he worked for now rested on this pivotal moment. The clash of voices filled the store, an orchestra of fear and defiance. Jake's heartbeat surged. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, challenging him to find the courage to demand change. Infused with both fear and conviction, he took a step back from the counter and cast his eyes over the assembled crowd, searching for any signs of hope among their skepticism. He realized he needed to draw upon a deeper well of strength, a strength he barely knew was within him. As uncertainty took hold, flashes of self-doubt emerged. Could he truly influence these skeptical hearts? What if this gamble ended in humiliation? But the thought of Clara's optimism ignited a fire within him. After all, she had thrown caution to the wind, braving the unknown for a chance, a new beginning. If he faltered now, he would not only let her down, but would also betray the version of himself he aspired to be. He straightened his stance, feeling that spark igniting into resolve. "Just think about it," he said, projecting his voice with newfound authority. "Were we really afraid of change, disruption of our routines? I understand those fears. Trust me, I've faced them myself. But that's not the legacy this town deserves. We owe it to ourselves to step into the future, not remain shackled by the chains of the past. Jake took a breath, scanning the room. He could see flickers of contemplation on a few faces, while others remained locked in doubt. A young woman shifted her gaze, appearing caught between loyalty to her community and the magnetic truth in Jake's words. He felt the momentum building, albeit slowly. Then from the back, a gaunt man spoke up. But what if we help her and it all falls apart? His voice cracked with concern. Then we learned, Jake replied, his voice steady. That's the essence of growth failing, then picking ourselves up to try again. We can't foretell the future, but we do have a hand in shaping it. It starts by overcoming our fears together. The room remained charged with tension, but Jake felt an internal shift. Here was an opportunity not just to rise for Clara, but to assert himself and redefine his place within this community. He was not merely an acquaintance stepping into the shadows. He was a catalyst for change. As the storm of emotions ebbed and flowed, Jake noticed May moving closer again. Her unwavering gaze anchored him. She had shown faith where others faltered. I believe there's something admirable about risking it all for a vision, she said, her voice cutting through the murmurs. Jake has a point. We need to evolve. Imagine what her ideas could bring. But we need to rally behind our own. Others shifted, visibly absorbing May's sentiment. Could they really grasp that aspiration had to take root, facing the uncertainties with courage rather than retreating into familiarity? But then another voice rose sharply. We're talking about the future of our livelihoods. You think it's that simple? Just change and expect things to fix themselves? Jake clenched his fists, feeling the pull of instinct. It would be easy to retreat, to dream of simpler times when disputes were either ignored or resolved with the passage of routine days. Yet that was no longer his path. He was here, standing against the tide, ready to make waves. Nothing worth having ever comes without risk, Jake said, his voice resonating through the murmurs. But the greatest risk is conforming to what we've always done. It's time to redefine who we are. If we stand still, we'll wither away. The words hung heavy in the air. Jake dared to hope, realizing this confrontation stretched beyond mere words. It was a reflection of their shared humanity. He wasn't just fighting for Clara. He was grappling with who he could become. The atmosphere hung thick with possibility, as if every eye in the room sought answers in the fragile web of human connections. Jake felt the charge in the air. He was standing on the precipice of something monumental, yet the severity of the challenge tightened his stomach. He needed this moment to catalyze his growth. He could no longer linger at the fringes of expectation. Today would mark a pivot, not just for Clara, but for himself, the man he wanted to be, grounded in conviction, faced with the daunting task of guiding his corner of the world toward the unknown. With every heartbeat resounding like a drum, Jake steeled himself for whatever would follow. Clara's vision relied on his tenacity, and he was determined to nurture that ideal even if shadows of doubt continued to linger. As the exchanges settled into an uneasy pause, the tension bubbled to the surface once again. Might they actually hear his voice, or would they retreat to safety? In that unbearable silence, Jake sensed that the answers lay teetering on the edge of their uncertainty, waiting patiently to be discovered, but also threatening to unravel everything he had dared to build. Would he be the anchor in this storm, or would his courage dissipate among uncertainty and fear? The collective silence was palpable, a tightrope of anticipation strung between the walls of doubt and the whisper of hope. Jake could see faces unearthing emotions they had buried beneath layers of skepticism, and it both thrilled and terrified him. He had dared to invite them to entertain the possibility of a new future, but now he was steeling himself for their reaction. He cleared his throat, ready to continue, but words failed him momentarily. How could he encapsulate everything that had brought him to this pivotal moment? Then he fixed his gaze on the young woman who had shifted earlier, and an idea ignited within him. Look around you, he urged, stepping closer to the group. This isn't just about Clara. It's about each one of us. Our burdens, our dreams, our failures, everything we've held on to for so long that may be holding us back. He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. Would they accept this shift from abstract to personal? The silence cascaded over him, thickened by the tension of unvoiced fears. He dove deeper. We each have our own pain, our own hidden struggles. I know what it feels like to hide. I know what it feels like to stand in the shadows of others. It's time we shed that skin. As he spoke, Jake felt the resonance of his message awaken something profound within him. These words weren't merely a performance. They were a testament to his own journey. He had faced his insecurities for years, the nagging belief that he somehow didn't belong not in this town, and certainly not in a role that invited others to follow his lead. But now, as he addressed this crowd, he recognized the power of vulnerability. Maybe, just maybe, it would elicit a similar response from them. The gaunt man from earlier appeared contemplative, his brow furrowed with uncertainty. Jake locked eyes with him, allowing a moment of genuine connection. Think about the dreams you once had, the ambitions buried beneath the weight of responsibilities, he continued. What if we risked embracing those dreams again, not just for ourselves, but for those who never got the chance? Suddenly, as if a dam had broken, murmurs spread throughout the room. Jake caught whispers of agreement, hesitant nods. Clarity shot through him. He was not merely advocating for change. He was invoking courage, shredding the veil of fear that had grown too familiar. Then, unexpectedly, May spoke again, her voice slicing through the room with clarity. What if our participation leads to something beautiful? But we need to be willing to prove it to ourselves first. Because if we do this, it means believing that the risk of failure might just be worth a chance of success. In May's words, Jake glimpsed a shared conviction taking root. It was the fuel he needed, but with that realization came a chill. The risk was palatable, yet thrilling. If they embraced this vision, he would have to lead from the front. Failure wasn't just a possibility. It now loomed close, threatening to engulf his newfound aspirations. Exactly, Jake nodded, feeling the shift in energy coursing through the room. Every inch we move away from fear is a step toward possibility. But we have to trust not just Clara, but also each other. And that requires vulnerability, the very thing we've shunned. Are we ready to be vulnerable together? The question hung in the air, its weight no lighter than a stone. The journey toward real change demanded more than just will it required faith, a relentless commitment to the unknown, and perhaps most daunting of all, the opening of their hearts. As the crowd began to respond, voices rose in agreement, hesitant but burgeoning with emboldened newness. Jake felt a surge of exhilaration, tempered by the gravity of responsibility that weighed down on his shoulders. He was now positioned as a leader, but was he ready to embrace that identity, to become the very change he envisioned? Suddenly, a new echo broke from the back of the room, challenging the fragile sense of unity Jake had started to build. But what if we fail? What will that mean for us, for our families? The question ricocheted through him, a stark reminder of the stakes at play. He could feel the tide of dissent rising, and amidst that tension, he understood the dichotomy. Success could be tantalizingly close or devastatingly out of reach. His heart raced as he faced this new conflict head-on. Imagine, he replied, his voice steady yet urgent, to not only experience failure, but to learn what it means to stand back up, to hold our heads high and say we tried. That's the essence of success, a journey marked not by the absence of failure, but by our resilience in the face of it. The room wavered, still caught in the storm of conflicting thoughts, and yet Jake felt the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the fragile threads of change beginning to weave together. This was just the beginning, a space of possibilities where he could redefine his narrative. But the final roar of doubt had stirred. With every heartbeat, the voices in the room steadily swelled, weaving a new tapestry of hope or tumult that could tear apart everything they stood for. In that charged silence, Jake was left to wonder. Could he rise to the challenge of leadership when even the slightest tremor could topple it all? Would this conversation end as a flicker of enlightenment or a cascade of disenchantment? As the crowd's uncertainty oscillated, he took a deep breath, ready for the next step into this unnerving unknown. Jake felt the pulse of the crowd, the nervous energy electrifying the air around him. Their faces reflected a spectrum of emotions: curiosity, apprehension, and a flicker of hope. Despite his facade of confidence, inside, he wrestled with a rising tide of self-doubt. He had ignited a spark in them, yet the burden of their expectations pressed down, heavy and unyielding. How could he steer this ship without capsizing? He drew a breath, steadying himself. This was not merely about convincing them to take a leap of faith. It was about finding the strength within himself to lead. The noise echoed in his mind. What if we fail? Each word replayed like a whispered warning. Those fears were his too. Failure loomed like a specter, threatening to undo everything he had worked for. He had spent years battling his own inhibitions, and now he faced the formidable task of overcoming them, not just for himself, but for this group of vulnerable souls seeking a way out of their own darkness. Let me tell you about my journey, he began, a flicker of defiance igniting his tone. I didn't wake up one day and decide to stand in front of you, to lead conversations about vulnerability. I was as terrified as most of you. More than once, I felt like I was playing a part in someone else's story, lost among the characters. He spoke candidly, allowing his vulnerability to show. Memories flooded his mind, his past failures, the moments that had chipped away at his self-worth, the countless times he had shied away from taking risks. The truth was, the fear of failure had often kept him paralyzed. But then, I realized something. Each stumble taught me resilience. Each setback was fuel for growth. It's about showing up, even when you're scared. The atmosphere in the room began to shift. Jake could see heads nodding in recognition. Maybe his honesty was resonating. This was not a polished narrative, but a raw account of his struggles. His heart quickened with the realization that authenticity was perhaps the strongest form of leadership he could muster. As I stood there, paralyzed by the what-ifs, it hit me, he continued, emboldened. What if I choose to embrace failure instead of fearing it? What if every fall became a step toward a better me? The murmurs that followed reflected a growing curiosity. Their defenses were lowering, allowing space for his message to seep in. He quickly scanned the room, his eyes settling on May, who seemed to lean in, captivated. Vulnerability is not weak. It's a weapon. It asks us to stand tall in the face of uncertainty and share our burdens. When we do, we're not just telling our truths, we're inviting others to share theirs. Jake realized his voice had risen, driven by a newfound fervor. The very act of sharing had started to ignite the same recognition in others. What if their expectations were not about succumbing to an ideal, but instead about the shared journey of facing their fears together? The energy in the room pulsed like a live wire. For the first time, Jake felt the weight of responsibility shift from overwhelming to exhilarating. A sense of clarity pierced through the haze of his uncertainty. This was his call to action. I cannot promise you it will always be easy, Jake concluded, planting his feet firmly. But I can promise we'll embark on this journey together, and we'll learn from each step, however unsteady it may be. It's time to challenge ourselves and redefine what success and failure truly mean. Are you with me? A powerful silence followed. Then May's voice broke through again, stronger than before. Count me in. Her clarity infectiously spread, igniting a volley of affirmations from others echoing in affirmation. In that electrifying moment, Jake realized he wasn't alone anymore. They were interconnected, all willing to share in their fears and aspirations. But as excitement lit the room, an unsettling thought crept into the corners of his mind. Leadership comes with sacrifices, personal and emotional. Was he prepared to navigate the storm of emotions that would inevitably arise? Anxious yet determined, Jake took another deep breath, feeling a sense of purpose surging through him. He had stepped onto a path of transformation, not only for the group he now led, but for himself. The question lingered, the very challenge that had brought him here, now loomed larger than ever. Could he adapt and rise, leading others through their vulnerabilities while confronting his own? As their voices crescendoed into a chorus of hopeful intent, Jake stood at the precipice of his own evolution. The next step was clear, yet dangerously uncertain. What awaited him on this new path? Would the very trials he wished to guide others through be the ones that would either uplift or dismantle him? Jake's resolve crystallized, tinged with an undercurrent of trepidation as he pondered not just the journey he had set upon, but the myriad paths his leadership could take. Now more than ever, he felt the clarity of purpose was indispensable, yet an unshakable question gathered weight in his mind. What if vulnerability not only opened the door for others, but also led him to confront his deepest fears? In the days that followed, the initial surge of enthusiasm radiating from the group began to blend with the mundane challenges of ensuring that the momentum didn't fizzle. He couldn't shake off the tightening knot in his stomach as he prepared for the next session. The excitement that had propelled him through the first talk was gradually overshadowed by a realization that leadership demanded more than passion. It demanded discipline and unwavering commitment. Jake began each day with simple intentions, reflective moments spent alone, journaling about both his aspirations for the group and his apprehensions. He found solace in writing, detailing what vulnerability felt like, how he battled the insidious whispers of self-doubt, and crafted strategies to redirect his fears into manageable goals. Each session with the group was an opportunity for him to test these reflections, yet he found solace in knowing that others were wrestling with their own. However, as Jake pressed forward, a new anxiety emerged. He noticed the uniqueness in each individual, contrasting their varying levels of engagement with the journey. Some, like May, flourished, drawing strength from their shared vulnerabilities. Others, in contrast, receded further into their shells, their haunted eyes dampening the room's spirit. It was a tangle of emerging stories buoyed by pain and triumph. Yet he grappled with the dread that maybe he couldn't steer everyone towards the light. Doubt creeps in. The thought echoed, refusing to fade. What if no? When confronted with resistance, he faltered. Would his transformation become a burden instead of a boon? In an attempt to bolster the group's connection, Jake decided to initiate small group discussions, where participants could share intimately without the spotlight of the larger assembly. He thought this could be a litmus test for not only their progress, but also his capacity to lead. As he prepared to facilitate, his heart raced with discomfort, tinged with the fear of being exposed. The room swelled with a delicate mix of apprehension and camaraderie. As he circulated among the pods, listening to fragmented narratives, Jake observed the emotional layers peeling away. Amidst individual stories of loss and hope, he was reminded of his own precarious, standing an embodiment of the rawness they all faced. He felt their anguished sentiments, and yet he sensed the fragility in his role to guide. What if he misstepped? Jake took a breath, steeling himself to redirect the conversation to vulnerability. We're not here to cloak our struggles in pleasantries, he urged. Let our truths breathe. It's through our wounds that we can find common ground. He sensed the shift. The air between them swelled with shared pain, stories of fear intermingling with tales of resilience. Curiously, the sessions reignited something within him, a flicker of empathy, a newfound strength arising from collective exposure. Yet, in those moments, he grappled with a provocative thought. Was it easier to play the role of a facilitator than to risk diving into others' emotional waters? As connections deepened, the potential unraveling of the group's dynamics loomed like a storm on the horizon. Faced with the prospect of losing touch with those who struggled, Jake's mind whirled. Would he stand firm, or would he find himself swept away, the very leader they needed to confront their ails, losing the thread of his journey amidst theirs? The time had come to face the inevitable conflict. The next session promised to unveil truths both revealing and tumultuous, but would he be ready for the revelations that awaited him? As he prepared for the upcoming encounter, the weight of leadership pressed on him heavier than before. Could he unearth the layers of both their pains and his own, or would retreat be the easier path? As the next session approached, Jake's mind raced with anticipation and dread. He had crafted an outline for the meeting, yet the words felt insufficient against the impending emotional tide that loomed. They would delve into the essence of connection, the stories that shaped each person's identity, and beyond that, the scars that echoed silently through their lives. He sensed this would demand more of him than the previous gatherings, where vulnerability had been a light touch upon the surface. Before the participants began to arrive, Jake took a moment in the quiet of the room, breathing deeply, grappling with his own uncertainties. In the stillness, he confronted the possibility that the session might not go as planned, that instead of healing, it could unearth deeper wounds. Would he be able to maintain control if emotions surged uncontrollably? The competing thoughts clawed at him if he faltered. Would he become a spectator in their transformation, a leader who led them astray? With a soft smile, May entered the room, her vibrant demeanor a bright contrast to Jake's internal chaos. She radiated optimism, enlivening the atmosphere. As their eyes met, she nodded knowingly, sensing his apprehension. "You okay?" she asked, and in that moment, he recognized the intimacy they had cultivated. It was a thread of support wrapped tightly around their shared experiences, a reminder that his struggles were not his alone. "Getting there," Jake replied, forcing his heartbeat to steady. "Let us just see where the conversation takes us today." As the group settled into their seats, the energy felt palpably different, charged with anticipation, but also layered with a thin film of anxiety. Each participant bore their own trepidations, yet there was something exhilarating about this shared vulnerability. Jake's gaze swept across the room, landing on those who had retreated, their discomfort palpable. It ignited a flicker of determination in him. "Today," Jake began, his voice steadying, "we're going to explore our hidden stories, the ones that shape us, sometimes without our realization." He watched as their expressions shifted, some bodies leaning forward, while others remained guarded. By sharing our vulnerabilities, we can embrace our truths and support one another in greater ways. There is strength in the uncomfortable, in the unseen scars. He introduced the idea of a talking piece, an object they would pass around, giving each member the floor to share as they wished. The first moment of silence was thick. Jake could feel the weight of their apprehensions like a tangible entity. Would they trust this process? May picked up the object, a simple stone, smoothed by years of water-esque caress. She spoke candidly about her childhood trauma, her voice a blend of strength and vulnerability that seemed to envelop the room. As her words poured forth, others began to share fragments of their own histories, each unveiling deeper layers of the pain they had carried. Their interactions created a symphony of emotional resonance. Yet amidst the revelations, Jake couldn't shake the foreboding change in dynamics. He observed the ways certain individuals held back, their expressions clouded by doubt and fear. Would he alienate them with his insistence on honest expression? With each person who spoke, he became increasingly aware of the chasm growing between those who were healing and those sinking further into isolation. In the moments between shared stories, Jake's mind whirled with a realization this wasn't merely about guiding others. It was a mirror reflecting his own struggles and helping them expose their truths. He, too, faced the shadows he had kept buried. It was clear he had to share his own journey. The fears that had held him bound were seeds of connection he had yet to plant. Just as Jake prepared to voice his own story, the abrupt sound of the door swinging open startled the group. A member had arrived late, their entrance fraught with tension. Jake felt his breath catch. It was Alex, the most tentative participant, whose silence spoke volumes. Would this be a distraction, or might it offer a turn in the session's flow? He realized that this unexpected moment could be a turning point. Would he invite Alex into the fray, or allow his own fears to dictate the response, possibly shutting him out? The choice hung in the space between them, heavy with the weight of uncharted dynamics, and an unsettling decision loomed before him. As Alex hesitated on the threshold, A storm of conflict ignited within Jake. Would he extend compassion, embracing disruption, or retreat into the safety of a planned agenda? His heart raced, knowing that the path he kneeled before would define not just the trajectory of the session, but potentially reshape his understanding of leadership itself. The pivotal moment pressed closer, a fork in the road. He must navigate where consequences and revelations awaited. Jake's thoughts jostled for priority as he locked eyes with Alex, who stood frozen in the doorway. The air in the room shifted, thickening with possibilities. He could almost hear the collective intake of breath from his group, a mixture of surprise and anxiety mirroring his own. This was no ordinary session. This was a moment poised on the cusp of transformation for both Alex and himself. "Hey, Alex," Jake called out softly, his voice cutting through the tension. "We're just getting started. Come on in." The invitation felt risky, welcoming disruption into a world Jake had carefully crafted hour by hour. Yet, deep down, something urged him to step beyond his habitual caution, to lean into the unpredictable. Alex shuffled forward, the weight of uncertainty evident in his posture. His eyes darted around the room before he sat down, a near imperceptible sigh escaping his lips. Jake felt a dart of empathy for him. He understood that coming into a space where vulnerability was currency could be terrifying. The last thing Jake wanted was to compound Alex's discomfort. "Thank you for joining us," Jake continued, now directing his gaze to the entire group. "We were just starting to share some of our hidden stories." He could feel the heartbeat under his collar, the pressure of expectation wrapping around him. He needed to delve into his own truth, but could he do so effectively? Would it deepen the connection or further alienate those still on the periphery? Before he could spiral into his own worries, May interjected, an encouraging smile illuminating her face. "Alex, would you like to share anything?" It was a lifeline, and Jake could sense the ripple of relief it brought. Alex hesitated, gnawing at his lower lip. "I don't know, I'm not sure I have story." The self-doubt dripped from his voice, a reminder of the issues of identity each participant faced. Jake's heart sank. He wanted to show Alex the power within his narrative, that everyone had a story, rough edges and all. "We all start somewhere," Jake said, threading his voice with a gentle warmth. "Even if you think you have nothing to share, whatever comes to your mind is valid." The room hung on his words, a shared moment of collective intention. He could feel the group's focus shift from skepticism to something resembling camaraderie. Perhaps by leading with his vulnerability, others would be encouraged to open up. In this web of emotional expression, leadership wasn't about authority, but about shared humanity. "I guess," Alex began hesitantly, drawing the attention back to him. As he spoke, Jake watched the timid flicker of vulnerability ignite a spark of courage in Alex's eyes. It lit the room brighter than any words could convey. Slowly, Alex shared pieces of himself, the feelings of inadequacy, the struggles of not being heard. With each syllable, Jake felt his own nerves smooth out. Here was the crux of it, connecting through shared pain and triumph. He had come to guide others into deep waters, yet he was realizing his own capacity to float and navigate alongside them. As Alex spoke, Jake recognized that the essence of leadership was in surrendering control, allowing the narrative to evolve organically. Emboldened by this revelation, Jake prepared to voice his own journey. But the hesitation lingered, a tug-of-war of instinct against fear. The more he fought to vocalize his own shadows, the more they remained shrouded in silence. "Just hold my truth for a moment," he whispered internally, grounding himself as he eyed the room, the participants now leaning into one another's stories, a tapestry woven from threads of shared experience. Deciding now was the time, Jake summoned the words that felt almost foreign, yet desperately desired to escape. "I, too, have faced moments when silence felt like a heavier weight than speaking," he began, feeling the support radiate from May, grounding his resolve. Yet, just as he felt the momentum building, the fluorescent lights flickered ominously, plunging the room into a surreal dimness. Conversations halted, and Jake's heart clawed into a new layer of uncertainty. The flicker was a stark reminder that discomfort could surface in numerous forms. What impact would this unexpected interruption have on his unveiling? Would fear eclipse connection? The uncertainty crackled through his thoughts, underscoring every passing moment, his next words now crucial, and the room's readiness hanging by an anxious thread. Would he navigate this darkness and lead them into shared light? Or would this closing moment dissolve the fragile bond they had begun to weave together? The flickering lights settled into a steady hum, illuminating the room again, but Jake could feel the tension reweaving itself in the silence that followed. It was a vital moment, a reminder that darkness was not just an absence of light, but a catalyst for transformation. Jake met the hesitant gazes of his group, a wave of resolve washing over him. If this room was going to become a safe space for vulnerability, it needed him to take that leap first. Sometimes it takes a flash of uncertainty to break through the comfort we've built. Jake began, drawing upon the shaky memories of his own insecurities. I've been plagued by self-doubt and the fear of inadequacy for as long as I can remember. Every time I've stepped into a space where I was expected to lead, I felt the crushing weight of what if I fail. He paused, allowing his truth to seep into the room. He could sense the room shifting as people's breaths deepened and their postures softened. Clarity began to emerge from familiar experiences. It felt empowering to expose his scars openly. I was always terrified of disappointing others, of being judged. There were days when the struggle to face my own perceptions of failure kept me frozen. Sharing my story felt like stripping away the very armor I needed to survive. The echoes of his own vulnerabilities harmonized with the pulse of the attendees, weaving connections of shared humanity deeper than he'd originally believed possible. He felt their collective breath, a sigh of understanding. They were hungry for authenticity. In leading you all, I realized I'm stepping into my own fears, hand in hand with you. Jake continued, the essence of his vulnerability strengthening his voice. The change we seek acceptance, growth, healing begins with acknowledging our fears, not hiding from them. Each of us carries a story that's both beautiful and painful. It's time we shed the doubt and allow our truths to shine, even when they feel heavy. As Jake let his words settle over the group, a soft encouragement sparked within him, emboldened by their presence. The quiet nods and glimmers of empathy shifted the atmosphere, transforming the once uncertain energy into something vibrant and alive. A sense of camaraderie blossomed, intertwined with the capacity to confront individual trials together. As the words left him, he finally caught a glimpse of where he stood personally and professionally. Not just a leader defined by tasks, but a human connection forged through shared experience. The weight of expectation began to lift, replaced by a steady confidence surrounded by mutual accountability. Now, let us not just talk, let us engage, he suggested, urgency lacing his voice. Pick up your stones and share your hidden stories. Let us break this barrier of silence together. Let us create something beautiful out of our scars. One by one, stones began to exchange hands, and with each person that shared their vulnerabilities, Jake felt the fabric of the room begin to shift. The tension that once shrouded the narratives was replaced by honesty. Tales of doubt transformed into stories of courage, and fear hushed under the weight of newfound hope. For Jake, each connection carved deeper understanding of himself. Observing those who once clung to silence, now engaging in shared struggles, resonated within him as a triumphant wind chime, an echo of accomplishment. The bond weaving them together transcended personal stories, morphing into a collective resilience they hadn't anticipated. As the session wore on, Jake found himself immersed in the variance of experiences. Each story enriched the group's atmosphere, solidifying their place within the community. He gradually realized that leadership was not just about guiding arrows to their targets, but fostering a nurturing space for unearthing truths. Finally, After a series of heartfelt exchanges, the session came to a natural conclusion. The energy felt warm, yet profound as conversations sparked around transitioning from fear into collaboration. In the days that followed, the resonance of that meeting lingered. Within Jake's spirit, he felt grounded by the revelations, buoyed by shared ambitions rather than the weight of unresolved doubts. Clara reached out, her words igniting additional inspiration. She was a vital thread in this tapestry. He had begun to weave a resilient partner who understood the power of interdependence. The next time they spoke, it became apparent how Clara had begun to navigate her past too, drawing parallels between them. "We're both healing," she wrote, "and I believe we can truly uplift one another while building this dream." Jake smiled, staring at the message on the screen, feeling those moments of connection bloom into something special. He had stepped out of the shadows, not only for himself, but also for those who looked to him for clarity. He had proved to himself that he belonged, anchoring both his ambitions and the aspirations of a community. A vibrant spirit infused his purpose. He had emerged, cultivated from fear, but forged with strength. The ranch would soon thrive, becoming a community haven, with Clara at his side, and together, they would share the journey of renewal. His journey was no longer defined by merely avoiding failure or judgment, but through embracing the power of unity amidst vulnerabilities. As sunlight bathed his surroundings, Jake realized he had achieved the balance he once thought was impossible. He had solidified his place at the forefront of change, not just in the community, but within himself as well. As he reflected on this monumental transformation, Jake knew the time was ripe to expand the bonds forged through their trials. Together, they were not just in pursuit of their dreams. They were the architects of courage, weaving a legacy built on overcoming fears and redefining their identities through the raw beauty of vulnerability. In those final moments of reflection, Jake smiled knowingly. Some paths carved together would be less traveled, but they would walk them side by side steadfast, no longer alone. Now, dear viewers, this is your call to action. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories that bring hope and transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. It truly makes a difference. Comment below your reactions and theories about the journey you've just seen. And don't wait even one more second to share this transformative adventure with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.